Earlier this month, PlayStation announced my most anticipated game other than GTA 6. But for some reason, a very vocal, very specific group of people already refused to play it. Leading up to PlayStation's June 2026 State of Play, the hype was palpable. We knew we were getting Wolverine, and honestly that was enough for many gamers. I sat down to watch the trailer at the beginning of the presentation, then when it was over, I turned it off and went about my day. Maybe 40 minutes later, I tuned back in, and I saw a familiar face. And I knew. We're getting a Daredevil game. No, wait, wrong Deborah Ann Wool character. We're getting God of War. But you play as Kratos' dead wife? In 1983, the video game industry crashed. Nobody was making good games, nobody was buying games since none of them were worth anyone's time or money. So the whole market collapsed. Nintendo in 1985 revived it. Not just because they made good games, but because they made games for boys. Prior to the crash, video game consoles were viewed as general home appliances. There wasn't a particular demographic for them. Many promotional materials at the time showed sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers gathering around the TV to play games. But once the industry crashed, and Nintendo wanted to revive it, they faced a problem. Stores refused to stock them in the electronics section since it was considered a dead fad. So instead, Nintendo made the decision to sell their consoles as toys. In fact, the NES wasn't even the main selling point. It was bundled with a toy robot and a ray gun. It was disguised as a playset. But since in the US, toy sections are segregated by gender, they chose the boy aisle at random. This deceptive bit of capitalistic revival was undeniably successful. Nintendo is now one of the 3 heavy hitters in the video game industry, worth $51 billion as of writing this. Hell, the whole industry owes its current ginormosity to Nintendo, with the whole industry worth over $200 billion. But are all of those billions of dollars worth what it did to women? In 2005, God of War released on the PS2 to critical and audience acclaim. At the time, everyone loved the hyper-violent, testosterone-fueled revenge quest. You play as Kratos, a Greek soldier turned god as he brings down the Pantheon on a quest for revenge after being tricked into killing his own wife and daughter. It was immediately established as a flagship title for the PlayStation 2, and a sequel followed in 2007, with another coming out on the PS3 in 2010. Their series also received multiple prequels and handheld spin-offs. The last prequel, God of War Ascension, released in 2013. However, it didn't receive quite as much acclaim as its predecessors.
Lara Croft is now such a legend in the video games industry that she's even got her own urban myths, one of which says if you press the right combination of buttons on your joystick, she'll take all her clothes off.
I might sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you don't have to look hard to find blatant examples of gendering in video games. In 1989, Nintendo released the Game Boy, not the microconsole, not the Pocket Gamer, not another gender-neutral title, the Game Boy. Many marketing campaigns also targeted boys. In fact, one of them glorified and trivialized violence against women. In the 90s, there was an ad where boys in a locker room were all looking through a peephole into the girls' side. Only instead of victimized girls on the other side, there were N64s. Playing video games was also advertised as rebellious, which is ironic, getting your idea of rebellion from a commercial. But anyway, it was meant to appeal to teen boys' rebellious nature, to escape nagging authority figures. Or, women. Even when video games had female protagonists, they were only meant to lure heterosexual men. Lara Croft, Zero Suit Samus, etc. These characters were only there to be sexualized, only there for the chance to plaster polygonal boobies on the marketing material. Women only acted as a marketing tool, not as who they were marketed toward. It's safe to say this era of video game marketing does not pass the Bechdel test. Shit's fucked up when real life doesn't pass the Bechdel test. God of War Ascension was poorly received by critics and audiences alike, mostly due to the tides of change. Hyperviolence, power fantasies, and demeaning sex minigames were suddenly immature and outdated. The series' treatment of women in general surely started to get on people's nerves. The women of the Greek pantheon only served as objects of grief or objects of sex. So the series went dark for 3 years. As I often like to ask on this channel, why? Why did gendering in video games become a bad thing? I mean, obviously, a lack of representation and inclusivity is inherently bad, but why was it especially bad when it was heterosexual men being exclusively coddled and validated? I wonder if, in an alternate universe where video games had been marketed towards women, would it have been as bad? Obviously, conservative women exist, paradoxically so, but even conservative women were left out of this hypermasculine craze. Just being a woman in a Call of Duty lobby in the 2000s and 2010s, and honestly even now, means you're pelted with misogyny, unwanted sexual advances, or just plain vitriol. But as I often do when I ask why, I put myself in a corner, because I have no idea why. I have a few theories, but none of them are satisfying, and all of them point the blame at biology instead of people. I don't think it's fair to say that men are just pumped full of testosterone, and so they're inherently assholes. But even if that's all it is, and men are more likely to be dicks when they're given power, why are they still dicks if we're seeing more and more inclusivity in video games? The male-centric marketing is gone, right? When the video game industry really started to boom in the 2000s and 2010s, more women started playing. Now, around half of gamers are women. So why are men still so awful? Gaming has famously been a boys' club, a space where men can get together and be shitheads and objectify women and fantasize about power and control, all without anyone getting in their way. So of course, when women started to permeate these spaces, men lost their power and control. And let me tell you, they did not take kindly to that. Honestly, it's not even that intentional sometimes. Making space for someone else can make you think your space is becoming small, even if in reality the end result is the most equitable. Some people just don't have the empathy to see it from that perspective. Plus, since gaming had been marketed towards men for so long, a lot of men felt it was part of their identity. So when that exclusivity fizzled away, so did part of their identity, even if that identity was made up by corporations in the 90s. Imagine how fragile you have to be for that to get to you. I'm honestly surprised I haven't heard more about this, but in 2014, something called Gamergate happened. It was started because a salty ex-boyfriend of a game developer named Zoe Quinn posted a lengthy, butthurt blog post about their relationship. He claimed that Zoe had slept with a games journalist to get a positive review of her game Depression Quest, even though that journalist never reviewed her game. The post was spread to all the seedy corners of the internet and sparked a ginormous harassment campaign. The movement was dubbed Gamergate, and their stated goals were to rid gaming journalism of corruption, nepotism, and things like that. But in reality, it was an attempt to push back against feminism and progressive social activism in gaming. The methodology of the movement was vile. I honestly am not sure if I've ever heard of a harassment campaign before. I didn't know it was a thing. I knew that men often harass women. I knew that women are unfortunately unsafe in public-facing positions, but I didn't know it was often organized like this. I'll call that ignorance on my part, since I'm a guy. They doxed, threatened, and swatted women with progressive views in the gaming space, with the goal to completely silence them through fear, stress, and security concerns. This widespread harassment led to many social media sites overhauling their terms of service to include anti-harassment measures, reporting systems, and more. Ironically, Gamergate had the opposite effect systemically than they were hoping for. The horrendous treatment of women suddenly being so out in the open made companies hyper-aware of workspace inequality and poor female representation. Things got better, but not by much. Unfortunately, even though Gamergate failed in its mission to keep progressive social politics out of gaming, it changed world politics as a whole. It was the first instance of something that would become a repeatable playbook that would be used by the alt-right for years to come, even still today. I wonder how much impact Gamergate had on Donald Trump's presidential election victory in 2016. You know, aside from the Russian interference. That's right, I went there. At E3 2016, a soft reboot of the God of War series was announced. It featured an older, weathered, quieter Kratos on a quest with his son, Atreus. The same types of people that partook in Gamergate hated the idea of this game. They called it Soy of War. When the game released in 2018, it turned out to be incredible. The combat was heavy, visceral, and incredibly satisfying. But at the same time, Kratos was no longer a mindless killer. He was introspective and remorseful. So many of the incels that were hating on the game had a dilemma. They couldn't just say the game was bad when it was clearly a masterpiece, so they just ignored the story and convinced themselves the game was about ripping heads off. Basically, they chased their own tails into believing that they'd won over the woke mob. At the end of the day, though, this was clearly a win for progressive values and stories in gaming. Though, just because the single-player experience we enjoy has become safer for women, that doesn't mean multiplayer spaces followed suit. A friend of mine is sort of obsessed with Rainbow Six Siege. It's all she talks about. It's sort of a problem. But she told me about how she feels like she needs to be the top player on her team to even feel worthy of talking. Otherwise, it's not worth risking verbal harassment. She doesn't even use Siege's in-game voice chat. She uses text chat and VCs with her friends on Discord when they play together. I asked her if the verbal harassment would be worse if she did use voice chat in-game. She said yes, without a doubt. My friend, I'll call her Eepy, has had far worse experiences on Arc Raiders, a very different kind of game. While Siege is an extremely tactical team-based shooter, Arc Raiders is a player versus environment extraction shooter. In Siege, you're teaming up with other players to kill other players or complete objectives to win the round. In Arc Raiders, you're teaming up with other players to kill robots, and sometimes other players, but dying means losing all your loot. Eepy was shit-talking another team from across the map, since she was kicking their asses. Then one of them called her... Actually, okay, hold on. If you're sensitive to this kind of stuff, please skip ahead to the timestamp on screen or in the chapters of this video. This kind of shit shouldn't happen, but it does. So be safe and take care of yourself. Okay. So one of them called her a fat pig and said he hoped she gets raped. He then went into detail about what he hopes happens to her. She was a minor at the time. She informed him of this, and he said, that makes it better. I said earlier that it's not intentional sometimes, that men feel protective over the space that's been theirs for decades, that they feel like part of their identity is being lost, however fragile you have to be to feel that way. All that absolutely does not fucking apply here. I mean, sure, that's their reasoning for this inexcusable behavior, but the behavior is still undeniably, vehemently inexcusable. I'm just glad Eepy found a way to feel safe when she plays Siege, though I wish it were even safer. In 2022, God of War Ragnarok came out. It was more of what made God of War 2018 incredible, and even more still. It featured a teenage Atreus on his own journey of growth and meaning. As the father and son grew apart and simultaneously together, both grew as individuals as well. Kratos learned not to rely on his son to quell his fear of his own past, and Atreus learned to feel deeply and strongly regardless of what his father would do in the same situation. Both new God of War games are beacons of empathy and gentleness, following a damning history of neither. Unlike what happened when God of War 2018 came out, the incel crowd can't pretend God of War Laufey isn't woke. They have to contend with the fact that women can be strong and they belong in video game spaces. They'll have to face the fact that real women, beautiful women, don't have perfectly unblemished faces. Faye's face is a direct face scan of Deborah Ann Wool's face, and they'll have to realize that they're alone because they're the problem, not women. And if you're watching this video and you're feeling defensive at what I'm saying, I'd recommend looking inwards and trying to understand why. It's never too late to choose being empathetic over feeling righteous. Righteousness is shallow and lonely. To choose empathy is a whole world unto itself. And so, as this journey comes to a close, I wonder if my words will change anything. I also wonder if these words should be spoken through my voice. I have no idea what it's like to be scared to talk in a video game. I have no idea what it's like to be afraid to partake in some good old-fashioned shit-talking. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman. But maybe that's where it all starts. The journalists, gamers, and content creators harmed by Gamergate weren't enough to stop it from happening. EP's age wasn't enough to stop that guy from threatening her with violence. So what is enough? When will it be enough? Maybe when some of you realize that the call is coming from inside the house, whether it's because I'm making the call or because you finally realize that you have to share this godforsaken planet with women, whether you like it or not. Also, it's kind of gay to hate women. You know me, I support queer rights, but it's kind of gay, don't you think? Thanks for watching.